Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
Do you know it's your calling to become an authentic midwife? Do you dream of attending women in birth? Have you felt frustrated trying to be a birth worker in the system? Are you looking for a better way to walk with women in total integrity, supporting mother-led physiological birth? Are you dreaming of building a thriving, profitable business as a birth coach? Well, we are thrilled to announce that enrollment for our Radical Birthkeeper School is now open. Classes begin June 1st, so head over to our website and get the details. The time is now, and we need you to join us in this birth revolution. www.radicalbirthkeeperschool.com. This week, I'm joined by Sadie, a new mother that just free birthed her first full-term child not long ago. Sadie first, a few years ago, experienced a pregnancy loss late in her second trimester and chose to stay home and spontaneously birth her precious stillborn son. After dreaming of her daughter, she easily conceived her and committed to the high vibrational work of wild pregnancy. With the support of her beloved partner and her mother, Sadie roared her daughter into the world, guided by the blue light of her spirit son who had passed years ago.
Okay, so I guess I should start by mentioning that I grew up in a very masculine household. So I had four brothers. I was always kind of keeping up with the guys. I wasn't connected to women whatsoever. I knew I wanted kids one day, but it wasn't on my radar at all. It really starts when I was 21. I met a lady, and she had two girls. And she parented her children different than I had grown up. So it was very loving, very validating. They didn't, they weren't working for her approval always. And I had grown up constantly needing the approval of the men in my life. And so I had taken on a lot of their beliefs about women, which was, they're dramatic, they're annoying, they're, I don't know, just your typical patriarch, like, household is really what I grew up in. And so when I met her, I was just like mind blown with the way that she treated those girls and how it was like this mutual respect of witnessing each other and not so much of teaching. And so I quickly learned that she had given birth to her second daughter at her home. And home birth was like something I thought happened in the past. It wasn't something that still happened today. So it blew my mind learning about that. And it really awoke something inside me that felt so true. Like I knew from that moment that I was absolutely going to give birth at home. And I didn't know the ins and outs of it. I knew nothing about the safety, how safe it was or anything like that. I just knew that that was what I was going to do. And so luckily she had a traditional birth attendant at her home birth. So I kind of like missed the midwives that were associated with the hospital here. So I didn't even know they existed. I just knew that like it was an underground thing. And I had no idea that it was attached, that there was midwives that were attached to the hospital. So Um, it wasn't long after that I met my now husband, and I knew right from the moment that I met him that we would start a family, and it was far in the distance and whatever. It wasn't something on my mind. But 3 months later, I found out that I was pregnant, and I felt so like naive and immature, and like, what did I do? I'm not ready. Like, I am starting a career. We've been dating for 3 months. Like, it's not, I wasn't ready. And um after witnessing my friend, I knew that there were things that I really wanted for my kids. I really wanted to have roots down, and I really wanted to be solid in myself. And I was in such a like learning stage of who I was that it was just like shocking. So I was trying to grasp the reality of being pregnant, and it not going the exact way that I wanted it to. Um, but I settled in, and the whole time I just couldn't picture a baby at the end. I couldn't picture being like really pregnant. I couldn't picture being a mom. And so that was like this weird battle on the inside of like knowing I'm pregnant, but not being able to really understand what was happening. So I guess it would have been around 16 weeks. I started noticing that I was not growing. And so I wasn't able to accept it because I was so afraid of that outcome. And I guess I should mention that I didn't plan to use the medical system. I did have an ultrasound to date the baby because that felt really important to me at that time. I don't really know why now, but it was really important that I, had a timeline. So something I could grasp too. Um, and so I stopped growing. I I think everybody knew, but no one was willing to bring it up to me. They knew it wasn't a safe conversation they could have. They could probably feel the resistance to it. And it would have been around 23 weeks that I finally started feeling like something's going on. Something's not right. I don't feel pregnant anymore. I'm not sick anymore. I feel great. And so I reached out to Kate, who you had on the podcast a couple weeks ago. I'd chosen her to be my midwife, and I reached out to her to see if I could kind of listen to the heartbeat, or like get some sort of understanding of what was going on. And she was away traveling, so she hooked me up with another traditional birth attendant, and I ended up meeting her on my birthday. And so we were listening for the heartbeat and we couldn't find it. And so she asked me, how would you feel if, this baby was no longer alive? And although I had so much kind of anxiety about it, I just said, you know what, I think I'll be okay. Like, I think that we'll get through it. I'll be okay. I'll be able to do it. And I don't know where that came from because on the inside, I was absolutely like, I don't know. I was beside myself. So we were staying in a hotel that at that time, and we went back to the hotel and we made love, and it triggered some sensations in my uterus. And so I was a little bit intrigued, but obviously very scared as well. um, and I started spotting. So I still hadn't told anybody what was going on. I hadn't told Scott, my partner, that I was suspicious of, something happening. And so the next morning we woke up and the contractions were stronger and I was still spotting. So we went home, and this time I went to the bathroom, and this time I wiped and there was a lot more blood. So I I just remember this like feeling of like acceptance wash over me, and knowing that it's time to acknowledge what's happening. So I told him, and we went to the hospital because I wanted to know if there was a heartbeat. I was still stuck on this heartbeat. Like, this means that there's life, right? And so this was probably the worst mistake that I could have made, but it was all I knew to do at the time. We went to Emerge, and we went into labor and delivery. and they had these sections, like, it's just a curtain dividing you and your neighbor. And so we were sitting on the bed, and there was this lady beside me that was like 39 weeks pregnant, and she was so frustrated with the situation she was in, and just wanted this baby to get out of her. And everything that I didn't want to hear at that time was what I was hearing. And so we waited for hours, like literally 2 hours before the doctor came in, and he brought like a portable Doppler machine. I don't know if that's what it's called, but and so he was going to listen for the heartbeat, and he put the Doppler on, and the baby appeared on the screen, and we could see the baby floating. Like, we knew that there was no life, but no one, like, we had to sit there for 15 minutes before he acknowledged that the baby was dead. So we were looking at the screen, we're looking at each other, we're looking at the doctor. No one's like acknowledging each other, but my heart is just like pounding in my chest. It was like the most painful, drawn out, 15 minutes of my life. And so he finally turns the machine off and looks at us and says, I can't find a heartbeat. So I'll send you for confirmation. And then just gets up and leaves. And so we're sitting there, like, our mouths are wide open, and we just look at each other, and like, everything came crashing in. Like, the realization, the acknowledgement, it all came flooding in. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed to be in such a public environment when I felt that, and trying to navigate how I was feeling, while also, our neighbors are still carrying on a conversation, and they're playing music on their phone. And like, it was the most horrendous thing I can, out of the whole situation. And so I wanted to just get up and leave. And I wish I had known that I could have, but I just sat there like a good girl, waiting for them to tell me what to do. And anyway, so after we had confirmation, this was hours later. We were still there, just waiting for them. It was like 4 or 5 hours total from getting in the room until they let us go. They let us go. And so this lady comes in, and tells me, I think, we think you're in pre-labor now. We're just going to send you home. You're probably just going to feel like you need to have a big bowel movement, and that'll be it. So here's some pamphlets, and good luck. Call us if you need anything. And so I take the pamphlets, and then I look at the top one, and the top pamphlets about how to navigate when your partner resents you for the loss of your baby. So I'm like looking at this pamphlet, like, is this protocol? Like, is this what's normal? Yeah. So I took the pamphlets like a good girl. I don't even know why I took them, but I took them, and we left. And on the way home, I called that other traditional birth attendant, and I'm so grateful for her, because she told me what would really happen. She's like, you're going to go through all the labor stages. It's going to be really painful. You need to hold the baby and smell the baby when he's born, so that your body knows to stop bleeding.
Mm.
And go home and do whatever you need to do that makes you feel good, whether, it's smoking a joint, whether it's taking a hot bath, like, just do whatever you're going to do to calm down. And so we went home, and I did that. And over the next like few days, this would have been Saturday. So we would have been, I was kind of just like grappling it. Like, we were kind of grieving, unsure of what was going to happen. I told my mom, and I told Scott and my mom that a midwife would come when the time was right. But like, don't worry, I'll, like, I got it. Like, I was so vague about it. And um, she never did make it, because Kate was overseas. And so I don't even know why. Like, I just knew that I was going to do it on my own, but I didn't want to tell them what my plan was, because I didn't want the added stress. So Monday morning, I woke up, and I had just different feelings. I woke up, and I knew that today was the day. I had this, like, I was so clear, and I had this like determination of like mustering up the courage to get through what I knew was going to happen. And thinking back, like, I knew nothing about birth. Like, I've watched a few videos, but not a whole lot. And so um, the contractions increased. And my mom came over, and I just labored throughout our little cottage that we were living in. Um, I was so shocked at how my body just knew what to do. Like, for knowing nothing about labor, my body just it pulled me into positions. It pulled me into locations, and it was just like this most like I'd never experienced anything like that before. So I labored throughout the day, and around 3:30, I threw up. And I remember vaguely hearing my mom on the phone with the midwife being like, "What's happening? Like, what's going on?" And the midwife was just like, "This is normal. She's probably in transition. Yeah, keep going." And so it was like 3 pushes after that, and the baby was born. And so I was on all fours on our bed at that time, and I turned around and I picked him up, and he was just this little boy, um, and so, like, foreign looking. Like, I couldn't believe that something so primal, like, isn't shown, or I couldn't find any information on what he might look like, or like, this is just kind of an area in life that's very shadowed and not expressed. And so I remember just being so shocked at what he looked like, and holding him and smelling him, and just kind of taking in what had happened. And so I'm starting to realize that what I'm doing is I'm going through it. Like, I'm not delegating, I'm not asking somebody else to do it for me. Like, I have to do it. And so I'm realizing that doing it means that I can process it as it's happening, and there's no trauma to bring with me, for the rest of my life. So I kind of carried that through postpartum. My mom wanted to bury him for us, but I was like, we got to do it. Like, me and Scott need to do it together.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
like, it needed to be done by who was experiencing it, and
Yeah.
not by somebody else. So we kept him for like a week, and we buried him together. It was, heartbreaking and beautiful all at the same time. Like, we grieved. My relationship was just like, it had the most beautiful start with this experience, because like, we just learned how to balance our grieving. Like, he would grieve and I would pull through for him, and then we'd flip, and it was just like this beautiful dance of navigating something.
Love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so
It's
true. Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I guess from that moment, I just realized how much work there was to do in myself, and how much I wanted to do to show up for future babies in a way that was fair to them, so that I was learning a lot about trauma, and just how much I can prevent from passing on. And so I really dove in. It was like, this is when I learned about free birth. And so the podcast actually gave me the language for what I had chosen and done. I didn't know about free birth, but I realized that that's essentially what I had. And so I had spent like the next few years just really diving in, and getting to know myself, and kind of awakening um, my connection to women, and really honoring women in a way that I'd never experienced before, and essentially honoring myself, and in the whole circle of that. So I guess 2018, I had a dream, and this little girl came to me in the dream, and she looked so much like my husband. She had kind of darker skin and dark hair, and she introduced herself as Magnolia. And she said that she would be coming in February 2020, and she introduced her brother and her sister.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
what?
It was so
Goosebumps.
wild. And my dreams make no sense. Like, I have really weird dreams, but this one was so real. I felt like I could
It's
feel
prophetic.
her. Yes. And so I had to write it down, because it was so different from what I was used to. But I learned like her personality, and their personalities, and their
Yeah.
names, and when they'd be born. And it was just like this incredible insight. And also I learned what I needed to do to align with them, so that they would come. Because I knew at that moment we weren't aligning, and that there would be no, like, I wouldn't get pregnant because we weren't on the same page. And so um, she was very much a feminist, and very like, all for women, and just very, I could feel that. So I dove into that, and I really witnessed women. And I mean, this podcast, is really what was the preparation for her birth and for conceiving her, because it was like trusting women, and that was the theme of her, was just learning to trust women and trust myself. And so I started prepping. I learned about conscious conception, and I that rung so true to me, and really aligned with me. So I planned, it was like a year out. I was like, I could feel that May 2019 would be the month that, I was like, that just feels like the month. And so I like cleaned up my eating. I stopped drinking. I did some like purging of my body, and just really wanted, her house, to be as healthy as it could be. I didn't want my health to be a factor, in her pregnancy. And so it would have been April, and I was like, "Yeah, we should probably start trying now, because, May it might not happen. Like, this is all, a feeling, like, who knows?" And so April we started trying, and then in May we conceived. And I knew I was pregnant. I just I remember driving to work one day. It was about 4 weeks after, and I was driving to work, and I all of a sudden realized that I wasn't alone. Like, I had this feeling of, being influenced by someone else's, like, energy, or their like, it was just the most, yeah, it was so weird. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm pregnant." And so I get home from work that day, and Scott comes over, and he's like, I forgot to tell you this morning that I had a dream last night that you were pregnant and cried." And so I was like, "All right, all right, I know I'm pregnant. Um, let's do this." And so I never took a test, because that hope, like feeling that hope, felt way better to me than having concrete answers. And I knew from my past experience that I would need to carve out space to feel, um, the emotions or the triggers that this pregnancy would cause, based on, my first pregnancy. And so I really dove in. I ate what I felt like. It was really intuitive process. Like, my intuition felt like it was at a high when I was pregnant. So I ate what I wanted. I exercised what felt good. Like, I walked a lot. I spent a lot of time in the woods. I learned to set really good boundaries. That felt really good. I learned, like, I enjoyed talking about it. I know a lot of women, find it easier not to share your plans. And I tried that, and it didn't feel good, because all I wanted to do was talk about, this different approach. And so anytime anyone asked me, I had so much fun talking about why I was doing what I was doing. And the pregnancy was really boring and normal. Like, it all just felt so normal and good. So I remember being pregnant with, my first pregnancy, and feeling so frustrated that I couldn't, just do it on my own. Like, I had to hire a stranger. I had to get to know them, to be comfortable with them. I had to pay them, when I wasn't in the position to do so. And I wanted to just do it on my own. And I didn't, because I thought that was so reckless and so irresponsible. And so through the progression of that experience, I knew the second time around I could do it on my own, and I would do it on my own. And I just wanted emotional support. I wanted to invite two people who knew me best. So I invited my mom, and I invited Scott. And I was very clear with them what, these are my boundaries. This is what I need from you. I just need you to make me comfortable if you can, make sure I'm fed and have my water bottle nearby, and look to me for direction. Like, don't look for anybody else. Like, I'm going to know exactly what I need, because I knew the first time. And so, yeah, so they were on board. It took, like, I spent my pregnancy kind of just like slowly dropping information here or there that I felt was important. Um, and they were both on board. They were both really excited, to experience it, but nervous. I mean, they had their own stuff, but I was so solid in knowing that this is what she wanted. Like, I could just feel that this is what this baby wanted. And so I was completely willing to honor that. And I really wanted her to have the best start to life that she could. And I just fully believe that this was the way to do that.
So can you speak to the fear element of just how you navigated fear, particularly because you had a second trimester loss, and then, whatever spiritual discipline you basically turned into, to navigate that. Because we have a couple things happening here, right? Like, we have just the choice to listen to your intuition and choose free birth, which is kind of enormous and unique on its own. And then, so I'm wondering about that, and just getting to closer into your birthing time, what did navigating fears look like for you, if at all? And then also, moving through that second trimester, and kind of, just connecting those dots of how you handled that.
Sure. Yeah. So I definitely did a lot of work in manifesting what I wanted. I realized that talking about the worst case scenario was happening way too much, and that just feeds into that energy. And I wanted to put my energy into what I wanted. And so going through the loss, as tragic and as heartbreaking as it was, I couldn't help but bear witness to how beautiful it was, and how my relationship just had the most solid foundation from it. What I had learned about myself, didn't realize how strong I was, or how much pain I could withstand, or how I could listen to what my body was telling me, and it was there all along. But when I was in fear, it covers my intuition, and I would feed into that fear rather than, stopping and taking a breath, and saying, what do I know, or what do I feel? And so I spent a lot of time um under like becoming one, like understanding that death happens, and that everything kind of happens and for a reason, essentially, and that there's you can make a choice with your situations. You can dwell on them, or you can kind of dive into the negatives of them, or the poor me. And it was just so clear to me that this happened to elevate me and to wake me up and make me realize that there's always lessons to learn. There's, every situation that happens is going to push you to grow and to, find your center, and to, just, it's part of the path. Like, good things and bad things happen, and, it's part of life. And so are you going to live your life feeling, scared of what's going to happen, or are you going to kind of take the reins and, and steer the horse?
And
Yeah,
co-create.
absolutely. So, I had such a solid pregnancy that the last few weeks of my pregnancy were a little like woo woo. Like, I kind of felt like I was losing my confidence, losing um, my vision, and so I was kind of dancing at the end of my pregnancy with like all these emotions. And I was afraid of, all of a sudden I was afraid of how bad it would hurt, and just these weird things were starting to come up. I had been so solid that I was like, why are these things coming up now? I'm just about to give birth, and now I have to navigate this too. But that was part of it. And so I just sat with it. I spent the last 2 weeks sitting with myself, feeling everything and acknowledging it and validating it. Um, and then I knew deep, like somewhere inside me, knew that these things needed to click into place in order for um, her to come. I knew that certain things needed to happen before she came. So it wasn't so much of a waiting game, but like a watching to see what happens for this transition to come. So I spent the day before her. I went into labor with a friend who had just had a baby, and seeing this baby made me excited for what was coming, and less like, ready for, more ready for what was going to happen. And because I was comfortable, I was like, pregnancy is easy. This is, it's a newborn that I'm all of a sudden realizing I know nothing about. And so I all of a sudden felt at peace with having an actual baby at the end of this, because that was different. Um, and so I went to bed that night,
Hmm.
wondering how long
Mhm.
I was going to be pregnant for. And I woke up at 4:30, and I had strong contractions. They were lasting about a minute, and they were kind of every 3 minutes apart. So I literally woke up and it was like, bam, you're in labor. Um, so I, got up, tried to tinkle around the house, tried to clean up a little bit,
Mhm.
and it became so apparent that that wasn't going to happen. So I woke Scott up and I was like, do you feel like meeting your baby today? Because stuff's happening. And so he got up, and my mom came over around 7:30. Um, and we all thought that the baby would be there early, like, maybe in the afternoon, because everything was so strong. I mean, I couldn't even talk through the contractions from the get-go. Like, I was, completely in the zone, breathing, focusing on my breathing, being very present to what it felt like. And each contraction was the same. Like, it was really intense. Nothing kind of shifted. And I felt like almost to my limit with every contraction. So I was like, what, it was a mind trip in how do I get
Mm.
this, like, how do I settle into this, or where's the surrender when every contraction feels like the end of the world. I felt like I was being burned
Mhm.
alive. Like, it was the heat in my body that would rise every contraction
Mm.
to only, completely flip to being
Wow,
frozen
brutal.
as soon as the contraction was over. And so I labored and I labored, and um, the sun went down. I finally asked mom what time it was, and it was 12:05 a.m. So that made me realize that I kind of had this like defeat feeling, like, okay, now I have no idea how long this is going to go. If it happened within 20, like the first day, that would have been fine. I could handle that, but now I don't know. And so I was navigating the marathon of it, like, how much longer can I do this? My brain started wandering to places like, I need to get out of this pain. Like, this pain is overwhelming. Like, and then I'd flip to like, you know, breathe through it. It so easily could be pleasurable, but you're so stuck in the pain of it. Like, I was just in this internal battle of trying to surrender, but trying to be present as well. And in this, what, like, I remember looking for the surrender. I
Mhm.
remember
Totally.
being like, whatever happens in this birth, like, I'm ready for it. I'm okay with it decimating me. I'm okay with reaching my limits. And yet here I am at my limits. And I'm like crawling back, wanting to, looking for comfort at every corner. So mom and Scott just, like, they kept me comfortable. They fanned me when I had a contraction. They rubbed my back. There was nothing anyone could do for me. I knew that I was too deep in it to go anywhere. I couldn't even sit in a car if I wanted to go to the hospital. Like, I was like, what did I do? Like, I was angry at myself for this choice that I
Mhm.
made. Um, and so I started to get to this place where it was so excruciating that I I was kind of losing it a little bit, and I closed my eyes and I could see this little blue light. And the whole pregnancy I had battled, what if this isn't this girl that I'm feeling? What if I have a boy? I'm going to be like, who the heck are you? Like, you haven't been with me this whole time. So I see this little blue light and I'm like,
Mhm.
shit, it's a boy. I was wrong. And so I'm sitting there like in a little pity party for a minute. And then I realized that this little blue light is my son, and that he's showing me that, pick yourself back up, get through
Aw.
this. This isn't going to last forever. You're going to meet your baby soon. You can do this. So I kind of had this new approach, and I had realized that I had met, you know, the depths of this pregnancy, or sorry, this birth. And so I get up, and it wasn't 30 minutes later. that my water breaks. And so I'm like, oh, sweet. Okay. Something's finally moving. This whole time the baby was so high. I checked myself a few times and my cervix was nowhere in sight. But finally my water broke. And so I checked myself again out of curiosity, and the baby is still nowhere in sight. So I'm like, man, this is weird. Like, this is not at all like what I've heard or what I witnessed from other women's birth stories. And all right, whatever, like I'm just going to go with it. Um, and so I start feeling pushy. And so I was so intrigued by this new, finally something had changed. Like, I had the same contractions for so long. And so finally something had changed and I felt pushy. So this was around midnight still. I started feeling pushy. And so I'm like learning how to push. I'm like, this is weird. Like, it hurts, but I'm pushing on nothing, what feels like. And so I start to kind of groove with it, and I start to listen again. And at the beginning of the contractions, um, I wouldn't feel pushy. I could feel my body opening, and then at the end of the contraction, I would feel this insane push urge. So I would finish this long contraction with a really, really strong push. And I continued like this, and I could tell that it was my body opening, and like it needed kind of some assistance to open. It was very kind of rigid and stuck. So I did this for a really long time. It's starting to, get into the wee hours of the morning. I could feel myself kind of bulging a little bit. I was kind of flipping between laboring on my back and laboring on my hands and knees. If I got caught laboring in a position that didn't intuitively feel good, it was unbearable. So I made it a point to, be in the position that felt most good or feel the best. But I was so exhausted. Like, my legs were shaking, my wrists hurt. I, was like, how much longer can I physically do this? And so finally I could feel pressure, and I had this like another wave of insane determination roll over me, that, I can do this and I'm almost there. I'm going to meet this baby soon. And so I started, I hardly remember this, but Scott and Mom told me that I started kind of chanting these mantras like, you can do this, only a few more. I'm not afraid. Because like knowing I knew I was gonna tear, and this like fear of like the pain of that. The ring of fire was so intense, and I was in that stage for probably an hour. I'd have a contraction, she would come down, I'd reach that limit, that fire, and then she would go back up. And so finally I had a contraction, and it was the most intense one. I didn't know it would be my last one, but I reached that limit, that fire, and I just kept pushing through it. And she just flew right out. She fell. I was envisioning in my head that I would birth her head, and then I'd have to birth her body, but she just like spiraled right out of me onto the bed. And I leaned back and I picked her up, and I looked and I saw that she was a girl. And so I was like, it's a girl. And I pulled her to my chest, and I remember she was so slippery and so gurgly and so foreign looking. I couldn't grasp her shell. She felt to me like she was who, I had thought had been with me this whole time. But it was now like learning what she looked like, and kind of trying to join the two of those together. And so I was looking at her, and I sucked some fluid out of her mouth, and she didn't really cry. Like, she was so awake and so alert and looking at me, and kind of like taking in the feeling of her new surroundings. And I just held her, and Scott sat on the bed watching us, and I was just like in awe. Like, the sting was so painful, but also like, mixed with this like incredible euphoria of like, holding this baby that I had just gone through the most difficult and most challenging experience ever. And so I looked at one of them and I was like, 45 minutes, remind me, I got to birth the placenta. And I was so tired. I was like, God damn placenta. Like, and so I get up to move. I hand her to Scott. I was like, I want to get up to the top of the bed and lay down. And so I hand her to, and I just lift my body up and the placenta slides right out. So this was like a minute later. Like I was shocked. I was like, I did not expect that whatsoever. And so I'm like looking at it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm done. Like I can really just lay down now. And so we put her placenta in a bowl. He hands her back to me. I kind of get all snuggled in and I'm looking at her and I'm just like in complete shock of this beautiful little girl. And I look over and Scott's like completely asleep, like just drained, like sleeping with his slippers on and like everything. Like, the whole experience had just completely wiped him. And I was feeling like, this would have been the next day. So she was born at like almost exactly 24 hours after her labor started. And I was like wide awake. Like I, could go on for days just staring at her. But yeah, it was incredible. And I was like, I am never doing that again. Like what did I do to my, like, that was stupid. Like, all these crazy emotions. But they quickly were replaced with like, that was the best experience I could have ever given her. It was quiet and
And yourself.
Yeah. And myself. Yeah. There was so much healing in that experience. That it was just so incredible and so real and so raw and primal. And I would never, like, not experiencing that would have altered, that experience has altered my life so much. And I'm just so grateful that I somehow have made it here and had learned about it and chose it for us, because she just had the most, like, it was so quiet and she just looked at me and like we just got to know each other, and like the bond that I felt like we were able to create from such a quiet experience has just been so pure, right?
I just felt like I was there. I could just see it. And I have a like distant memory of the photos that you shared in the network. So I'm just like pulling off of those and just how cool your setup was and the softness of your family and just, oh, go Mom and Scott too.
I know.
I love it. Just, I really, it's so touching when we get to hear stories where the moms of the birthing women hold space. It's so, gosh, just so special and hopefully will become more common.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she just like she knew me best, right? Like she was able to look to me and let me lead it. I remember at one point I was like, I got to get out of this. Like, who can help me? And she like looked at me. She's like, yeah, that's it. This is birth, Sadie.
Yeah.
And I was like almost, I felt mad at her for not taking, doing more. And then, but it was exactly what I needed because,
of course,
like, yeah, it was a good choice to have the two of them there.
So I know you're only 8 weeks postpartum, so it will keep evolving and revealing itself. But at this point, can you articulate how that whole experience has changed you?
Oh man, I'm absolutely still learning that, but it's made me sure, like I'm so sure now of myself and my choices and my intuition. And it's played a big role in navigating how to be a mom, and how to kind of step into that role of like being a matriarch in your family and shaping your family in a way that you want it to. I feel like our postpartum has just been absolute bliss. I mean, we're in a pandemic right now, but our situation, it's almost it's just incredible. Like it's hardly affected it because we're not processing trauma, and we're not, um, you know, I'm just able to be present with her, learn what I need to. Breastfeeding has been incredible. I was so worried about that because that's all I ever heard was stories,
Yeah.
of it not working out. And she just latched on right away. Like it was very uneventful, like very intuitive.
Yeah, I remember, because breastfeeding thankfully was also very easy for me. And I remember after a couple days being like, am I missing something? Like, is there something I should be doing? Is the other foot going to drop? Or what's the expression? Is the other shoe going to drop? Like, could it really be easeful, as it was being? And I remember really having to make a conscious choice to let that go, that idea that like it was going to get hard at some point, or I was going to get mastitis at some point. And I chose to look at that thinking and be like, am I willing to let this be easy? Can I just let it be easy? And thankfully I got a yes, and then it continued being so. But I remember that kind of, yeah, just like programmed, like you're saying, from these rampant narratives, all around, that it almost made me feel suspicious that it was so easy.
Yes, that is exactly how it went for me. The first few weeks, I'm like looking for things, that could be
Mm-hmm.
wrong. Like, her latch, I need to improve her latch, but it's not painful. And, is she
Right,
eating
right,
it? Like,
right.
I think I found a lump. I must have a clogged milk duct. And it's like, oh, no,
Uh-huh.
no, I don't. Like, it was so, yeah, just so uneventful that I had to do a lot of work too, of letting that go and grasping the reality of what was actually happening.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So good. Do you have anything else you want to put into the talk?
I just want to say thank you for your work because it gave me language. It gave me experiences. I don't know anybody, around me that had free birthed. But these women that are on the podcast, like it just gave me a sense of reassurance in the way that I felt. And it gave me the confidence to really go through with it. So thank you for the work that you do, this podcast. I'm so grateful to be a part of the community. Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it is so cool to see. And now we've been doing the podcast enough years now that people who listen to it now get to come on and tell their stories. And it's so fun. It's such a cool thing that we're all co-creating.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Well, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.